Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Inspire FC Grassroots Coaching Conference. I've got to say a huge thank you to Chris and the two Jakes for, first of all, inviting me, but also working with me so closely and professionally in order for this to happen. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some ideas with you, and I hope that it's going to really help you on your own individual journey to become the best foundation phase coach that you can be. I've been on my own journey. It started probably 40 years ago, but the most recent journey and the one that's had the most impact upon me really started about 7 years ago when we had a new technical director at the Football Association, and he wanted to work at all levels of the game to really nail down and to pin down what our identity was as a national association, and then what that would mean to the development of our players and the national teams at all levels that would represent England. So we started out on our DNA project, and my role in that was to work back from senior players playing for England in both the male and female game and say, well, if we want the players to operate at this level, what does it look like when they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years of age? So that was my role. It's been probably one of the most challenging projects I've worked on, but also one of the most rewarding. Because it's been 7 years, actually looking back over that period is a really useful practice for all coaches. So becoming good at reflecting on your practice is something that I would advise all coaches to invest time into and become good at. So in looking back over the project, during the 2 years before lockdown, I embarked upon what was termed a roadshow. So I wanted to take our ideas around best practice in a practical sense. I wanted to engage with the grassroots coaches, and I wanted to really take our message to as many people as possible. So I embarked upon these roadshows, and we went around all of our county associations. So we did around 80 events in total. So looking back, this conference has made me just reflect upon our key messages. The first key message to those coaches in their thousands who attended the roadshows was that love is a much better teacher than a sense of duty. And we can't make children choose football. We can't make them choose to be physically active. But if we can make being active and playing football the most positive and memorable experience that they will ever have, there's a real likelihood that they will come back and really engage with what we're trying to do and the benefits that have for not just them as children, but for long-term participation and enjoyment in the game that we all love. So this was the real headline message. And then as we dig deeper, we looked at our key priorities. And the first key priority was the coaches knowing more about the developing child. And if we understand more about how they develop, not just physically, but cognitively, emotionally, and socially, then we've got a much better idea or a much better chance of meeting their needs as young children first, rather than saying, yeah, you've come for football and all the answers lie in the football. The more we know about the young children, the better chance we've got of meeting their needs. So we really asked coaches to just try to find out a little bit more or understand more about those young developing children that came to our sessions. We also wanted to send out a message that even though the children are very young, football is not an early specialization sport. And we didn't want them to only play football. So we asked coaches to consider, as part of their warm-ups or as parts of their sessions, to include other activities that would help build a really broad and robust physical and technical base to all of the learning that was going to follow. So we asked them to make sure that the fundamental physical literacy skills of the children were as good as possible by really blasting them with as many experiences as we could. So that was one of our strongest messages. We did that knowing that as the children get older and they want to specialize more, then all of that investment is really going to pay dividends when they really decide to focus upon their football. So that was one of our other strong messages. The last part of this puzzle is about the relationship between the two. So we've got young children wanting to engage in football and physical activity, and we've got the role of the coach that really joins those things together. And if the coach is highly skilled, highly motivated, really enthusiastic, kind, and patient, then bringing those two things together, the children and football and physical activity, is going to be a really special place. So we wanted to raise the importance of foundation phase coaching. In our country, and I'm not sure whether it's the same in Australia, for many coaches, if you work in the foundation phase, it's a stepping stone to working higher up the food chain. And we all know that, you know, we're preparing most of the children to play 11v11. But I just see there's a real magic and something that's quite special about working with children during this period of their development. So I never really wanted to do anything else. So we wanted to say to coaches, do you realize how important this job is? And we want to help you do it as good as possible. So you'll then see that we tried to categorize. We broke the game down into 3 areas: in possession, out of possession, and transition. And we came up with 9 statements, 3 for each area, that we really wanted to prioritize as our headline messages. So the in possession one of staying on the ball or mastering the ball was sending out a really strong message about how important it was to ensure that each child had millions of touches on the ball, millions of chances to move with the ball at their feet in order to build a really strong connection with the ball. And the best time to do that is during the foundation phase, and it pays dividends for years and years to come. But we have to make the investment now. The nicest part about these 9 headlines is that they applied across all of the 3 phases of development in England. So we have the foundation phase, our youth development phase, and then the professional development phase. So these 9 headlines actually stretched across all of those age groups. But under each one, we had some quite specific age-appropriate extra information, because obviously staying on the ball and mastering the ball is important for foundation phase players, but it might be more of a maintenance program if you're in the professional development phase and your skill development journey is almost complete. So we tried to distinguish between the phases under the same 9 key headlines. The staying on the ball headline created the most discussion because, and some of it was deliberate. We wanted to create a discussion or a debate about the development of our youngest players. So choosing this phrase, we wanted players to stay on the ball for longer, created this discussion and this debate. So having sent that out to the wider game, it was important that we began to communicate exactly what we meant by staying on the ball. What we wanted to communicate to the coaches was, this is what staying on the ball is. And it is about, we want players to stay on the ball and still be able to keep possession for their team. It's a really important point in that we don't impose the adult model of the game upon our foundation phase children. Most adults in a game of 11v11 will keep the ball by passing the ball accurately and consistently between them. The foundation phase game is not the same. The players haven't got the same level of understanding about sharing and cooperation. But so we wanted to say the players are in a place and playing a game where we want them to develop this connection with the ball. So we want them to stay on it for longer. We want them to have more individual time on the ball. But we also, and point 3 was one of the points that a lot of coaches read, but didn't really take on board, because we actually do want the children to begin to understand how and when to share the ball effectively. So if you stay on it for longer, then you not only satisfy your need as a foundation phase player for really wanting to be exciting and creative on the ball and wanting the ball at your feet, but in staying on it for longer, we can also work with you as to the best time for when you need to share it. But if the coaches are continually shouting, pass it, pass it, pass it, what we're getting is a coaching approach that is inappropriate for very young children. And also, the players never get that special time individually on the ball. So it was almost a double whammy. And we wondered why, as a nation, we weren't really creating those special, highly technical, exciting, creative players. It was because for a lot of the time, we were getting 7 and 8 year old children to pass it in a tiki-taka style like Barcelona, which was always going to fail. So we sent this very, very strong message out. We also wanted to say exactly what staying on the ball wasn't. And I think as an association, if you're trying to communicate with your coaches, it's very important that you tell them what you want or that you would like them to think about, but also to tell them what you don't want. And so we said that the staying on the ball, it's not encouraging players to be greedy or to dribble, down blind alleys until you lose the ball or frustrating your teammates. It's not about that. It's just saying to coaches, there is a balance to be struck between players enjoying their individual time on the ball and sharing it as we move towards the adult game for foundation phase players that might be 10 or 12 years down the line. So these were the beginnings of our key messages for that DNA journey. At this point, we are now beginning to think of, well, having established that approach over the last 7 years, what's the next layer? What's the next phase of development? And this is where we're going to next. Very clearly and very strongly, the development of more skillful players has been written into our next 4-year strategy. So it's the top line of the FA strategy for the next 4 years. We want to develop more skillful players. So what does that look like?
No meio, Verón ganha para a seleção brasileira. Lá vem Verón, é do jeito que ele gosta. Verón, mais um pila, jogadaça, Verón! Gol! Lo mismo van jugando con Juan. Verón va llegando a Brasil. Ojo, Verón para hacer el primero.
So, as you can see from the video, I didn't see many English players, and I know I edited it. So I've deliberately picked some clips to really show how important and how exciting actually staying on the ball, running with the ball, doing something individually on the ball, how exciting that can be for the people watching the game, and also for the playing. So as a nation, we don't produce enough of these players. It's getting much better. I have to say, over the last few years, we have made some huge improvements. But we want our youngest players to learn how to, as well as pass, because we know how important that is. We want them to learn how to travel really fast and effectively with the ball at their feet. We need to help them become more comfortable if they're faced with an opponent in a 1v1 situation. We also need to help them understand how stopping and starting, changing direction, changing speed can all help you provide problems for the opposition. So if we put those individual abilities together with a team collective about passing and cooperation and sharing the ball, then we should be able to produce something quite special. What could this look like in the foundation phase? So we've got another video, and we held a tournament at St George's Park, the National Football Centre in the UK. And we invited some under-9 academy players from the professional clubs. And we played them on different surfaces, playing different numbers, different formats, to different rules. So some of the games had corners, some of the games didn't. Some of the games were played in a cage, some of the games were played on an AstroTurf. So we tried to demonstrate how, in the foundation phase, we needed to give the players lots of different experiences in order to really broaden their development and their understanding of the game. So playing different formats was really important. So if we want players to stay on the ball and build a really strong connection with the ball, what does it look like when 9-year-olds are encouraged to do it? And we'll see that when we play the video now.
One out, one out. Come on, go quicker. Release more, fellas. Eyes up. Keep working. Go side. Good boy. Keep going. Keep ball.
So the clubs that were invited have really been picking up on our key messages about how important it is to develop the individual and their connection with the ball. And I think you'll see that the players are beginning to really embrace that, partly because it's a great thing to be encouraged to do, but also they're in a period of their development where satisfying that need to be on the ball and to try things and to explore and experiment is so important. So as coaches in the foundation phase, we have to feed that and we have to maximize the development possible from that. So I hope those young players were a really good example of the direction that we're trying to go in. Part of our key messaging is about Well, as coaches, what do you need to get better at? Through the videos, we're able to show some examples of what the players might do when they're encouraged to do certain things. But what do you as coaches, what are your priorities? And on the next slide, we tried to gather some ideas so that we could communicate those to coaches who wanted to buy in to this idea of developing more skillful players. So we broke down the idea of skill development into 6 areas, and they're on the slide now. So it's when coaches are watching their players or when they're planning their sessions, we want them to think in terms of these 6 things. So I might be watching a player and I might say, right, in terms of movement, how do they move their body effectively? Can they change direction? Can they stop and start effectively? Can they use their body as a barrier? Do they use their arms, their hips effectively when under pressure? So as a coach, what do I need to observe? And through observing, that gives me an idea of what help and support I can give the player. The next one is awareness or scanning or noticing. So some players will do it quite naturally. Younger players, they're not great at scanning. They obviously do because they're picking up information from their environment, but it's not as refined as it would be in an adult player. So we have to look for signs of scanning. Is the player turning their head? Are they able to scan, but it doesn't look as though they're looking around? So their head might not move, their body might not move very much, but they still seem to make the right decisions. So we wanted to put this on coaches' radar because the research is telling us that the players who scan the most are the best players. So over time, we can work with players as to what they see. What are they looking at? What does it mean for your next decision? How does this inform what you do next? So we're really raising the profile of awareness and scanning, but we must also appreciate that very young players, they don't do it effectively at the moment. We're going to look at players' positioning, about do they know where to stand to really begin to deceive and cause a problem for their opponent? So do they always try to, we call it earn their back, where they're just playing off the shoulder in order to, time their runs onto a pass. So we look at where players stand, and it might be that we can give them some very simple help and support in just taking up slightly better positions. And we talk about positioning rather than a set position. So in the foundation phase, we're really against locking players into one position. We want them to experience others, but we want them to think about their game in terms of their positioning around the field in relation to the ball and their teammates, so that they're always trying to be as effective as possible in where they position themselves. This idea of deception is a great one. We've already got some real engagement from young players because being able to trick, deceive, or disguise your intentions, young children really pick up on. So can you do something with your body, with your eyes, with the ball that's going to try to trick your opponent? And this will help you disguise your intentions. We talked about staying on the ball, and we've got timing in relation to being in possession and out of possession. So timing in possession might be the timing of your turn, or when you release the ball, or the timing of when you stop and start in order to throw off a defender so that you get an extra yard of space. Timing out of possession is the timing of your movement, the movement into space, the movement away from an opponent. So we want to put these things on the radar of all the coaches right across the game, but particularly in the foundation phase. We've used the word techniques rather than technique because we want coaches to understand that we want them to look at the outcome. So we might not have the perfect way of passing the ball. So the non-kicking foot might not be planted in a particular place. The contact on the ball might not be perfect. Your body might be out of line or out of balance, but the outcome for the pass is still a successful one. So we want coaches to understand there is no one perfect way of doing anything, and players must be allowed to find their own way of performing certain techniques and certain technical actions. So from all of our research, all of our discussions, we've tried to galvanize this into 6 key areas that we want coaches to really consider. And it's not so that they can bombard the young players with all of this information. My descriptions are really for you as coaches. What you might do now is use this as a framework for observing your players more. This player doesn't really scan very much, so that might be a priority for them. This player doesn't move very well, so in the warm-ups, I'm going to include these kind of activities to try to help the player with those kind of things. So these are the next big messages that are going to go out to the coaches across England, in the hope that they will again buy into this notion of a national identity. And that identity is really built around the development of more skillful players. So what might disguise and deception look like? I pose the question, is this a natural trait, or is it something we can help the players develop? The first thing we've got to do is notice whether players have any elements of disguise and surprise in their play. And if they do they do that naturally? Have they learned it? Have they picked it up from, watching players on the TV, or is it just from practice? So on the next slide, we've got another video, and this might show you some examples of players at 9 years of age who are beginning to bring elements of disguise and deception into their play. I hope you enjoy it.
Go forwards.
Yes.
Can you receive Jake? Jake, can you help him? Liddell, brilliant. Good Dan. Put the ball down, put the ball down.
So if we can raise the awareness of coaches to be able to be much better at spotting what the players can do, what they might need help with, I think we're onto something. But what we must do is make sure that this is all surrounded by a real environment of fun, enjoyment, and major participation. So I know I've given you a lot of technical things to think about, but remember that second slide about love being a much better teacher than the sense of duty. If your children are coming and thinking, well, every time I go, the coach just talks to me about 6 things that he's heard on a on a conference webcast, you're not going to engage the children fully. So try to get a balance right between your own development and then what you can take from that to actually help your players get better. I mentioned scanning and the importance of it. More and more research is throwing up the importance of scanning, noticing the things around you, because they're the things that will inform your next decisions. But as I mentioned, foundation phase players are not great at it at the moment. They might be looking, but they're not great at saying, of all of the things I can see and all of the information I'm taking in, what is the most important bit? What do I really need to focus on? So the first step is to get them looking around. The second and third steps are to get to know what they're looking at and then help them as to, having taken on that information, how can it best inform your next decision? So let's have a look as we move on to the next video, what that scanning and noticing might look like with our under 9 players who came in for our tournament at St. George's Park. So, different types of scanning. And we have to accept that we might not know whether players are scanning effectively. We might not be able to tell by their head movements, their body movements, what they're taking in. So this needs to impact upon our coaching approach. So we have to make time to just work with the players, ask them some very simple questions about What were you looking at? Did you see the space? Did you see how close your opponent was? And if he's that close, how does that influence what your next decision might be? I'll go back to my point about we, as coaches, we need to know a lot, but we've also got to be very mindful of the fact that the sessions must still be fun and engaging. And it really isn't easy. And I have great respect for coaches who work in the foundation phase, because for me, it's a tough gig. But we can make it easier by making sure that we engage with the children as children first, in the hope that they'll stick with the program and we can help them become better at football. So if we want to introduce the notion of scanning, how might that be done? Let's watch this next video. This was a group of 11-year-old boys, grassroots players, and I wanted to introduce the idea of just looking around. That was the first step, but I tried to do it in a way that would engage them as 11-year-old players. So the game involves 3v3, trying to get to an end line, but the only way that you can transfer the ball between each other is to throw it backwards over your head. So in the early stages, it was chaos because the players were just running and then throwing it over their head without looking where their teammates were or where their teammates were supporting. But eventually they got the idea that I can still throw the ball behind me and know where it's going and still know where my teammates are positioned. So if we watch the video now, hopefully you'll see how the players begin to develop it.
So this game is about making a connection with one of your teammates. All right, so when you first started playing, there was a lot of I'm just going to throw it backwards. How are you going to make a connection with your teammate? Talk. So it's been very quiet up to now. There's been some calling for it. How else? Movement. Show me then, Daniel. So yeah? Oh, brilliant. So let's just say you were on this pitch, Daniel, and you made that movement. Even though I've got to throw it backwards, could I see you run from there to there? Yeah. Of course I can. So by that kind of movement, I can actually see where he is. Off you go. And then we can get it to him. So this game is designed to get you looking around rather than just throwing it blindly over your head. So we're beginning to look at scanning and noticing where your teammates are. Let's go. Oh, I love it. Yes, now we're looking, now we're having a little look. You can run with it. Oh, we're even going out. We're even going backwards. I love it. Brilliant, you're going to score. That's a goal. Now kick the other way. Play the other way. You're trying to score into the other end zone. It's got to be fast, got to be fast. Run with it, run with it. Good boy. Now you've got it. Play, play, play. You're going the other way. It's still in, it's still in. Well done, Ollie. Now you've got it. Great look, great look. Yeah. Don't forget you can have a run with it. So if... Hold it there, brilliant. You know, if you suddenly get the ball in a position here and you're desperate to throw it, even if you're having a great look, if you've still got some steps, turn, change the situation and then throw it. Yeah? So we're looking for you to react to whatever situation occurs in the game. If there's nobody on you or there's a space to run into the space. What I've seen are some brilliant forward runs. So you know when we're playing a game of football, if someone's got the ball and you're making those forward runs, there are some brilliant attacking things that we can do.
So I don't want you to think this is the only way that you can do scanning. Hopefully it was a way that begun to engage the players, but also gave me the chance to point out some really important things for them to begin to think about. And as coaches, we mustn't think that I've told them this once, everything's going to be great. They're going to take it on board. They're going to do it every training session. They're going to take it into matches. We know that development doesn't work like that. So please see this as a long-term development. We don't do scanning or movement or disguise in 2 weeks. It's going to take years and years. So we must come up with innovative ways to keep reinforcing those same key messages. It's almost a summary of some of the things we've talked about helping players fall in love with the game. Seeing each player as an individual, that they will all bring their own little superpowers, they'll all have their own personality and characteristics, and that is absolutely brilliant that they do. So we want to develop those individual characteristics and their personality rather than galvanize them into one homogeneous blob of foundation phase players. We want to recognize difference and really celebrate that. As coaches, we want to develop a better understanding about how we can help players become more skillful. And our framework that includes those 6 key characteristics is just our starting point to begin to communicate that out to coaches, so they become better informed and can observe their players more closely and more effectively in order to help them better. We also, as coaches, need to know the demands of the game. So although we work in the foundation phase, we still have to know how the adult game, that game at senior level, we have to know how that is progressing, how it's changing, and really how it works, because that's the game that we're preparing our young players for. Coaches, if during this conference you think, yeah, but Pete doesn't know what he's talking about, this video is from Phil Neville, who at the time was our senior women's England coach. And it was great to hear him talk in terms that I would really think are related to our key messages for foundation phase coaches. So if we just watch the video now, hopefully you'll see that it's just not me at foundation phase level that's really beginning to ask coaches to prioritize certain things. Phil does it brilliantly and so much more eloquently than I could. So let's watch the video now.
Ultimately, to be successful, you've got to win games of football by scoring goals and by individual bits of brilliance. I think there's this massive thing in football at the moment about a collective team effort to win things, which you always need. But I think we've gone away from the actual individual bits of brilliance. I hope we're not suffocating the individualism in the game. So the things that I like to promote in my players is actually wingers playing 1v1, wingers having the ability and the freedom to beat somebody 1v1. And do you know what? If you're a defender and you have 10 1v1s, it only takes my winger to beat you once to cross the ball to score a goal. My forwards to be a little bit more selfish. So I'm trying to now promote within my team a bit more individualism to fit into a team collective shape.
So even at senior level, even at international level, we've got a coach who's saying, do you know what? Those 1v1 confrontations, that individual ability is so very, very important. We can actually start that off in the foundation phase, because in most instances, that's why children come to football. They want the ball at their feet. They want to be excited. They want coaches who encourage them to discover what is possible with the ball at their feet. Discover what is possible if they move their body skillfully, and how that will help them to become more creative and really pose problems for the opposition. This is the magic of working within the foundation phase. And we've got a fantastic opportunity to make those experiences and those opportunities in the foundation phase as magical and as positive and as memorable as possible. Thanks for listening.